Well, this could be interesting. I'm trying to do things a little bit differently today. Um, if you see me looking like I'm not looking at the camera, I'm actually looking at the camera, but I'm not looking at the lens of the camera of my phone, if that makes any sense. Um, anyway, trying to get some verses here pulled up. My computer is giving me fits outside. Um, anyway, hope you guys are doing well. It has been a week. I swear, sometimes these weeks feel like they're a month long. Again, not much has changed with us. Still working. Haven't eaten out as much this week. Just haven't had time. Which is weird. It doesn't make sense, does it? I feel like I'd have more time to do things, but we don't. So it is what it is. Been working outside a lot. It's been a good week to do that. Hopefully you guys are getting out and getting some sunshine and kill off this virus. I don't know about you, but I'm over it. I'm over the news. I'm over the media. I am over all of it. It has been, it's just very frustrating because I think now I feel like we're getting to the point of we need to start slowly drifting into the area of letting people back to work. Just as a prayer request and a side note, we got a message Sunday night. My sister got a phone call in West Virginia at the nursing home, from the nursing home where my mom is. A patient got sick and tested positive for this crud. So Monday, they tested everybody in the facility, all the nurses, all the patients. We were supposed to hear back by noon yesterday on Tuesday. Didn't hear anything. So they did say, but then they came out later yesterday afternoon and said that there were 3 people that had tested positive, but the West Virginia Health Department wasn't releasing the names yet. I don't know why. Yes, I'm making fun of West Virginia. Sorry. My brother-in-law, who is an absolute hillbilly, he'd laugh at me too. So anyhow, the machine broke or something that was doing the test, which is really helpful. And so we're supposed to get my mom's results tomorrow. Here's the thing. You guys know I've been praying that the Lord would just take her. And parents, if you don't know the story, my mom is not doing well physically. She's basically a shell of herself. So I'm not trying to be morbid, and I don't hate my mother, so please don't take it that way. And I can laugh about this because my mom has lived a good life up until the last few years. This disease has really just... If I could show you pictures, even 5 years ago of my mom to where she is now, it's 2 different people. But this PSP is just nasty. Guys, I miss you. I've been able to reach out to some people. People have been reaching out to me via text or in the gram. They've been checking me in the gram. And I've been reaching out to some people that way. I feel like I failed someone the other night that wanted to talk, but I was with my family. Sorry, guys. When I'm with my family, I'm with my family. I love you. But I want to be there for you. I always want to be there for you. But my family comes first. So unless it's a dire emergency, my family will always come first. So we were kind of spending some time together, just chilling on the couch, watching some stuff, and just being together. Right now, it still is the 3 of us, Chasers, my wife, and I. My wife is about over this, too. And being a nurse, now they're prepping to start accepting COVID-positive patients because they have no choice as far as babies being born. So, just pray for protection for her, if you would. Continue to pray for our country. Continue to pray for each other. And these masks. Have you guys seen some of the masks these people are wearing? I mean, it looks like a bank robbery happening from the 1800s. Some of them. Some dude had a diaper on his face the other day. Okay? A diaper. I'm like, what the heck are you doing? A diaper. Yes, I'm not kidding. It was a diaper. Wow. Thankfully, we don't. It's recommended here. I don't know what's going on in Delaware. Our blessed governor, who can't make up his mind about anything, he recommended that we wear face masks of some kind. So anyhow, it is what it is. I'm over it. I just want to say something along those lines, and then I'm going to get into this week, homework and all that kind of stuff. This week, noticing some things in the news. I don't watch the news much. I see what people post, and then I dig in and I find some things, and some interesting things are happening. When President Trump mentioned this new mixture drug, it's basically a malaria. It's not a vaccine, but it helps people with this COVID-19 to recover. The numbers aren't matching up. They're still not matching up. Now, they first projected that 2.2 million Americans were going to die. As of yesterday, we're down to 60,000 they're expecting to die. Do you know how much of a difference this is? It's like almost 90%. They have no idea. So it's time, I think, personally, that we start opening up again. Get people back to work. Get the economy moving again. Get people out of their houses. There's some... one of my best friends that I sings with, she's pulling her hair out with her kids in her house, which I don't understand that to an extent. But some people live in, they just, being with their family too much drives them crazy. I'm not here all day, so I'm not dealing with that. But I was all winter, so I don't know. The numbers, do not believe the death toll numbers. That's all I'm going to say to you. This Dr. Birx, that is one of the doctors that has been working with President Trump. She literally came out and basically said yesterday, long story short, I'm not going to quote her, but paraphrase, if anybody is dying in a hospital right now, and they just so happen to catch the coronavirus by the time they're dead, they're counting that as a coronavirus death. So the numbers are very screwed up. I think I'm going to make one of Mr. Hilliard's predictions. I think the president is probably had about enough of this. So we're going to open up sooner rather than later, and you can imagine. And the funny thing is if there was a certain other person in office, let's put it this way, a certain other party in office, we would not be shut down like we are. I'm just telling you now. As a matter of fact, remember the Democrats were the ones that tried to fight this in the beginning. So now they're going after... whatever. The impeachment is on the brain. It is what it is. Here's the deal. This week, I always find myself a little bit more serious this week. I don't know why. I don't know if it's on purpose, if it just happens knowing that Easter's coming up and knowing what this week represents. I'm going to get there in a second, but let me talk about this real quick. Guys, here's the deal. World Civ, your exam, you need to take it this week. Now, and I will be sending the review for US History probably tonight. So you all should be getting that Wednesday evening at some time. If you have questions about that, you can email me as always. Text me, those of you that have my number. Message me, Instagram, Facebook, whatever. I try to respond to everybody. I have failed a couple of you because some of you I have been promised. I did not get to grades. It is my own fault. I have no excuses. I just didn't do it yet. They will be put in. No one is failing. At least that I know of. Excuse me. So World Civ exam this week, US History review is this week. Now, I may get in trouble for this. It's not my intention to get in trouble for this. I feel like in my class anyway, I'm trying to follow the guidelines of break and all that kind of stuff. So here's my plan. There's no homework assigned for anybody next week. Treat it as a spring break. That's how I'm looking at it. That's how I'm still I'm trying to follow the calendar as much as I possibly can. So when you take your exams, World Civ people, can you just get those to me? Get me your grades as soon as you can. Those of you that need me to grade it, I can send you the answers because I have that other book for US History. When you take the exam next week, or you can have your parents grade it for you, however you want to do it. I trust you, and I am trusting you, and I truly appreciate everybody got back to me with their grades last week, and they have already started coming in this week, and I'm so thankful for that. Thank you guys for staying on top of that. You know what? I'm not even going to bother this week. Here's the thing. This week, I always find myself in deeper thought because of what this week represents to us as believers. Palm Sunday, and this year's a little bit different, but at the same time, in the process of being different, I think it's hitting me a little bit harder because I'm realizing more and more that the church is just a building. Not that I'm discouraging anybody from going to church, because I won't stop going to church, especially when we can start going back to church. I can't wait. I'm an extrovert. I love to hug people. I miss hugging, fist bump. I miss all of you guys in that way. I miss relationships. And right now, relationships outside of your house are a little bit difficult. But technology, where would we be without the internet? Where would we be without our phones? Kind of interesting thought. But Sunday being Palm Sunday, I always tend to think about Jesus entering Jerusalem. And when Jesus entered Jerusalem, all of the hosannas, people laying down their garments so the donkey that Jesus was on, would not touch the ground. Not 4 days later, 5 days later, the cheers of Hosanna turned to crucify him. Now, it's always interesting, the timeline and how I look at things. And some of you that have had my class before, you've heard me talk about this every year at Easter and the Thursday before Good Friday. I personally believe that it was Thursday that Jesus died. Because if you look at how the Jews counted night and day, he was buried, the Bible says he was buried 3 days and 3 nights. So he would have been buried on Thursday. So you have Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 3 days. I'm sorry. He would have been buried night. So Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night. He would have been buried probably in the evening of Thursday. And the 3 days, he rose again on the 3rd day. So he was buried in the evening of Thursday, in the ground, or in the grave, Friday, Saturday, and got up on Sunday. And I say he got up because that's what we have to celebrate. But I want you to think about this. All of the violence, all of the things that you see on television compare nothing to what Jesus went through. His best friends in the garden, they went to the garden. And that's the same night that Judas was going to come and betray Jesus. They came to the garden, and they were there praying. And where was Judas? Judas was obviously with the Pharisees collecting his 30 pieces of silver. There's a lot of history behind 30 pieces of silver as well. But as that was happening, Jesus was in the garden praying. And he asks his disciples to stay with him, to stay awake with him and pray with him. And we see in Mark that Jesus went to them 3 times, and 3 times. It's always interesting the 3 times. 3 times tried to see if they were awake, and they really weren't. At the same time, you remember the story of Jesus telling Peter that he was going to deny him 3 times before the rooster crowed in the morning. And this is where the story gets interesting to me. And this is the thing that shows me the humanity of Jesus. In part of Jesus' prayer to God the Father, he basically says this: if you can take this cup away from me, do it. But not my will, but your will be done. Basically what he's saying is, I really don't want to do this. I know what this is going to be. I know what this is going to feel like physically. I know what this is going to be like emotionally. I know what is about to happen to me, so if you could please take it away if there is any other way. But not my will, but yours. Yours be done, God. As Judas led the soldiers and the Pharisees to arrest Jesus, the ultimate sign of betrayal was Judas kissing Jesus on the cheek. And he said, "Hail, Master," pretty much making fun of Jesus in that moment. And as you think about this, think about the fact that he didn't want to do this. But what he would face the next 24 hours is absolutely gut-wrenching. If you have not ever seen The Passion of the Christ, you know what I'm talking about. They portray it pretty well. If you have never seen it, I challenge you to watch it with your family. Make sure it's cool with your parents, because it is very, very violent. It brings to life the true picture of what Jesus went through. And we know what happened to him. I'm not sure if you know what a cat of 9 tails is. A cat of 9 tails is usually like 6, 7, it could be more pieces of leather. And in the end of that leather there was tar, but in that tar there were pieces of rock, there was glass. And that's what they beat Jesus with 39 times. Now the reason that these leather straps, what it would do is when it hit you, it would wrap around you. And when it wrapped around you, it pulled. So it pulled all of the flesh off of Jesus. And it's interesting in Psalm, I'm drawing a blank at the chapter, but you can look it up. In Psalm, David gives us a prophecy of what Jesus probably looked like on the cross. And he said, I could look down and I could see all of my bones. I could see basically all of my insides. And as they beat him 39 times, the blood, the mess that Jesus would have been is literally beyond anything you could probably imagine. And during that time, all he could do is scream out in pain. His best friends left him. There was nobody there but him. No one. There was no one around him to save him. He was by himself. The only person that he had with him was God the Father. How ironic is that story this week? It's just, sometimes it just feels like we get so lonely. There's nobody around, nobody understands what we're going through, when actually we're all going through this, but we're not all going through the same things. And sometimes we just feel like we're by ourselves. And I think if you want to look at this spiritually, this moment in time right now, this moment in our lives is a time for you to get one-on-one with God. Because basically that's all you got. You've got your family, yes, but you know what I'm saying spiritually. Spiritually, you can't talk to everybody like you used to, and we can through technology, but it's just not the same. But Jesus only had him and God. That was it. And what they did, they threw a robe around him. Now imagine what happens when you look like the piece of meat that Jesus probably did. And they wrapped a robe around him. And then what they did was put a crown of thorns on him. Now these weren't just little rose thorns. These were thorns that were probably 2 to 3 inches long. And it didn't say they placed it on his head. The word there kind of makes you feel lead like it was jammed on his head. As if he hadn't been beaten enough. And they tell him to carry his cross, and as he gets ready to carry his cross, they rip that robe off of him, reopening all of those wounds. You ever done that before? I've done it in much smaller places than my whole body. Imagine that. But Jesus carried his cross to the point where he couldn't carry it anymore, and they chose Simon of Cyrene out of the crowd to pick up his cross and carry it for him. And as Jesus made his way up Golgotha's hill, what thoughts were going through his mind? Was it you? Was it me? Was it this world? Was it, I'm in so much pain it doesn't even matter, just take... We have no idea the thoughts of Jesus. We do know his words. Very few words from this point on. But the interesting thing is this, is that when they laid the cross down, all it says is that Jesus laid down. They didn't force him down. He laid down. He laid down his life. Now, it's interesting too, and I've talked about this before in the past, the nails. Now, they probably couldn't have been put through his hands because that, if you think about it, there's nothing to hold there. So they probably put it between his wrists, where the 2 bones are, and that's what held him on the cross. There are several people that think, several theologians, and it doesn't really matter, historians even, that think that they also had to tie him up there with a rope, otherwise he just would have fallen off of the cross. And that's probably true to an extent. It's probably very true. But I don't think it was too pleasant. So they drove the nails in between his hands and his feet, laying his feet on top of each other, kind of the same idea of driving the nail straight through. And the Bible says, and it even says in David's prophecy in Psalm, that none of his bones were broken. And this is amazing, that none of his bones were broken. None of them. But as they lifted that cross up, he's basically naked. He's basically a piece of steak that's covered in blood. And that jolt, when they drove that cross into the ground, all of that pain again, he took on him all of our sins. Now, I saw this poem once, and at the end of the poem, it's basically this. It says this: Jesus, how much did you love me? He said, I love you this much. And he stretched out his arms and he died. But even during that time, Jesus still had the authority to promise heaven to one of the 2 thieves on either side of him. You had one thief making fun of him, if you truly are the Son of God, basically call your angels and take us all down. Jesus knew he couldn't do that. Because if he did, we wouldn't have what we have now. We would not have salvation. We would not have the relationship with God that we have. We couldn't. But the next thing that takes place is the thief asks him to be with him in paradise. And Jesus tells him that he will be with him in paradise. And one of the last few things that Jesus said was, I'm thirsty. And some of the soldiers thought it would be funny to put a basically a sponge on the end of a stick and put vinegar instead of water. And that bitterness, when you're dehydrated, when you're losing all of your senses, but that sense of smell is still there. And the bitterness of vinegar anyway is just nasty. But then we know one of the last things, he talked to Mary and John. He tells Mary to John, behold your son, John, behold your mother. Basically to take care of her. That's what I need you to do when I'm gone. I need you to take care of her. And I need you to take care of John. And then we know that Jesus basically said this: Father, into thy hands I commit my spirit. And I read this verse at Christmas, these two verses. Actually, it's two passages. One verse and one passage. Luke chapter 2, verse 7. And I like to mash it up. That's what I call it, the mash up with Philippians 2, 6 through 8. And this is what it says. And we talked about this at Christmas. Understand, I still say this. Without Christmas, there is no Easter. Without Christmas, there is no Easter. And this is what the Bible says. And she gave birth to her firstborn son. And then jump over to Philippians chapter 2, verse 6, and you'll start off with this. Who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but he emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, and being found in the likeness of men, let me go backwards. But emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men. And being found, in verse 8, being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. And then you jump back over to Luke chapter 2, verse 7, at the very end of verse 7. And she wrapped him in swaddling cloths and laid him in a manger because there was no room for them in the inn. Now let me read that to you one more time, without the interruptions of the verses. And she gave birth to her firstborn son, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, a thing to be understood. But he emptied himself by taking the form of a servant and being born in the likeness of men. And being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. And she wrapped him in swaddling cloths and laid him in a manger because there was no room for them in the inn. That's what Jesus did. That is the importance of what Jesus did. He loved us enough to die on that cross for us. Now, when Jesus died, it is interesting. We have this picture that a storm came. And there's thoughts behind it that maybe God was angry. God knew what he had to do, but he couldn't even look on his own son at that moment. And we know that in the temple, the veil was torn from top to bottom. Now, you got to understand, this thing's like 6 or 7 inches thick. This isn't something that any person can just do. But it was torn from top to bottom. And I think it gives us this picture because what that curtain did, it blocked us. It didn't allow anybody to get into the Holy of Holies. But what this did, to me, it's several things. From top to bottom, only God could have done that. But the second picture that it gives us is in that moment that the veil was torn. In that moment, God opened up the relationship for us to come to him at any time. Now think about what Jesus did. He took every sin that you have ever committed, every sin that you're going to commit. He took them upon himself to the point where God could not look at him. God couldn't look at us, and that's why we have the picture of the Old Testament, and when we used to have to, we didn't, but the Jews did, that you had to make sacrifices for everything. This was the ultimate sacrifice. This was the last sacrifice. But we know it didn't end there, did it? We know that this Sunday we will be celebrating the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And there's so much more to that story after the fact. How when the disciples and Mary Magdalene and Martha came to the grave and it was empty. And Mary sat there and talked to an angel. She thought she was talking to the gardener, but guess who it was? It was Jesus. The disciples couldn't believe it when they came back and they told them, but Jesus appeared to them before he had ascended completely into heaven. Dig into that. I challenge you to dig into that. But before he ascended into heaven, he appeared to his disciples one last time. Because remember Thomas. Thomas said, I'm not going to believe it's him until I can put my fingers in his nail prints, and I can put my fist through his side, my hand through his side, where they put the sword to make sure Jesus was dead. And the water came out, which is interesting too, because when the sword was thrust into the side of Jesus, water came out as if from a stream. Jesus gives living water. And that's what Jesus did for us. Can't imagine the pain, we can't imagine the suffering, but thank God it's Friday, but Sunday's coming. And oh, what a different world we live in right now, and oh, what a different time it's going to be. And I challenge you, do not look at this Easter as any other thing other than that you can worship God from your home this year. You can worship him anytime, but this year is special. I think it's so amazing to me that we're focusing on family, and families are together and they're gathered around pretty much your computers or your TV, because our church, we live stream on television. So we can watch on our televisions. You can watch YouTube on television. You can watch Facebook on television. But we can do that. And this year, look at it as something that's different, but focus so much on what Jesus did. You can dwell on his suffering. I kind of look at it like this, like between now and Friday, it's kind of a depressing time for believers. For me, I take it very seriously, and I'm not trying to tell you what you need to do. It is for me. It's a time of reflection. It's a time of what was happening today during the week of Holy Week. Is this what was going on? Was this the Last Supper? How was that? How did it all go? How did the week go? How did the week progress? You know, how you look forward to things. And sometimes there's things that we have in our lives that we look forward to, not excitedly, but we look forward because we know it's something that we're going to regret doing. Imagine the thought process of Jesus that whole week. It's Friday, but Sunday's coming. Listen, I've been a half hour. I do this every year in history. This is history. This is our history as believers. This is church history. This is the story of Jesus. This is the story of the one that gave us the ability to be able to have the things that we have in our faith today. I challenge you to work on this relationship with him. I challenge you to be spending more time with him. Guys, stop focusing on the girls. Focus on Jesus. Because if you stay focused on him, God will lead you to the right person at the right time. Girls, it's the same thing. Listen, I love you guys. I pray that you have a great Easter. I pray that your times with your family, at least it's different. I'm sure it is for all of us. But I pray that you take this time and focus on him, focus on your relationship with him, but also do your history homework. I love you guys. Talk to you next week.